Today's episode is brought to you by FreedomProject Academy. Looking for a K-12 classical online school built on Judeo-Christian values? FPA is enrolling now for the fall. Request your free information packet at freedomforschool.com. That's freedom, F-O-R, school.com.
It's time to get educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. This is the Dr. Duke Show.
Hello, peeps and peepettes. Welcome to the show. Before we get started, please hit that share button so we can get more peeps involved. Okay, kicking things off with Vicki McKenna and CultureCast. Vicki, good to see you.
Am I your peeps?
You're a little ray.
You're my peeps, dude.
You're a little ray of sunlight in a otherwise dark world. Good to see you. And so, we've got two really important stories and comically stupid stories. So let's just get right into it. I should say not all archaeologists and anthropologists, but the woke ones, particularly female anthropologists, professors, are now arguing that we must stop classifying human remains by gender and race. Vicki, it's a skeleton. You don't have any skin. You don't have any brain tissue. You have very little body substance. And yet the only way you can identify these things are by gender and race, but according to the progressive left, not anymore.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they think they're going to accomplish. Oh, I think I know what they're going to do, what they think they're going to accomplish, and that is erasing human history. So a lot of people were content to roll their eyes and say, oh, it'll pass. We'll just wait this out. Well, they're trying to destroy the meaning of humanity itself so that it can be recreated. They are essentially playing God in a way of simply trying to replace the idea of what God created and the history of what God created with their own imaginative reinterpretations of that, because they think they can improve on God. And so in a lot of ways, this erasure of meaning that the left insists, whether it is, woking any institution, whether it's transing the dead or woking the military, it's about erasing meaning. It is about replacing that meaning with something that has no tether to reality, logic, common sense, data, facts, or history, because everything is the politics. And they believe that if they can alter the meaning, erase the meaning, and replace it, then they can ultimately change the way people think so that going forward, the manipulated thoughts of humankind will ultimately benefit the left. And I really do think that this is something that is solely motivated by a desire to increase access to power, be it an archaeology student or somebody at the World Economic Forum. I think the motivations are the same.
Yeah, and this one more thing, I think everything you said is absolutely correct. This is also a great big leap for the transhumanism movement.
Right.
It's not just transgenderism. We don't want to identify male and female. One of these idiot female anthropologists said, because, we could be misgendering 5 and 7 and 3,000-year-old people. Got news for you, sister. They didn't understand what you have made up, transgenderism. They didn't understand that. So the idea that you are misgendering them is BS. But the other thing this is transhumanism. Think about what they've done. When we dig up animal bones, there's no racial classification whatsoever, and we almost never pay any attention to the sex, right? These features don't matter. When you see dinosaur bones or mammoth bones, we don't go on and on about racial characteristics or sex. This is also transhumanist in the moment that they are reducing humans simply to animals like all other of the animals. Race and gender and all that stuff doesn't matter. It's just one great big materialist lark.
Yeah, and materialism, which I think you're exactly right about transhumanism, and materialism obviously is what is the motivating philosophy, I think, behind it. But the idea that there's nothing special, there's nothing exceptional, there's nothing unique, there's nothing meaningful or godly about human beings. So you get rid of that, and all of a sudden it makes sense to, morph an animal part onto a human body. These guys out there who think that they can upload their brains into computers, so it's one of the offshoots of transhumanism. That's because they don't reckon anything special about human beings that's different from a machine, because they have been taught to essentially deconstruct all meaning and recreate the meaning in a way that they prefer, whatever their truth is. And so, going back to the archaeologists here, can you imagine? I mean, you've dug up a bone, a box of bones, and instead of being curious about what the history of that box of bones is, what that person might have been like, what that person might have been doing 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 years ago, instead you set it aside and you think, now what can I do to try to prove that this was a trans gender person, 3,000 years ago, when the very concept of it didn't even exist? Instead of pursuing history so that we know more about our past, so that we can understand the story of humanity. And if we understand the story of humanity, you do get closer to God, understanding that. Instead, we're just going to set that aside and see if we can't find a way to take those 3,000-year-old bones and turn them into a way to promote our own politics. It's pathetic.
Take a look at this tweet here we've got from Emma Palladino. My trans and non-binary friends, you might know the argument that archaeologists who find your bones one day will assign you the same gender as you had at birth. So regardless of whether you transition, you can't escape your assigned sex. Let me tell you why that's bullshit, she says, right? So listen to that. She has to concede, the lefty, that biological gender at birth is a thing, and then immediately goes on telling us why it's not real.
Yeah, so, really 4,000, 5,000 years from now, nobody's going to dig us up and say, gee, I wonder what kind of fashions they preferred. I wonder if this man wanted to don a pair of stiletto heels and a mini skirt and a wig to pretend he was a woman. No one 3,000 years from now gives a damn about what your fashion or sexual preferences were. They'll just say, geez, how cool. A big box of bones that's 3,000 years old. Geez, I wonder where this came from. But no one is actually out there thinking, geez, what was the gender identity of this person? This is, something else that this is doing is not just, trying to apply modern politics to ancient archaeology, which shouldn't surprise anyone since they're trying to apply modern politics, woke politics, to engineering and mathematics and physics and you name it. But when they're going to erase meaning and by erasing history, they're erasing me and they're erasing you. Anyone who of the 99.9995% of the American population that does not have a problem with their sex at birth, they're just completely erased and eliminated, which is A-OK, because again, you want to alter history to promote politics, and our erasure is necessary in order for them to achieve that. Now, it certainly is going to be necessary to achieve that to trans the past and going forward into the future as well. So we've been erased, but nobody seems to care much about that.
And after the break, we're going to talk about how actually living trans women who are actually men are getting lots of women pregnant in jail. Let's talk about that coming back.
With all the censorship taking place on social media platforms, we've made it easy to keep up with your favorite content. Simply download the Freedom Project Media app in your app store. Get access to 18 new videos a week, plus thousands of archived shows, lecture series, and educational animations. Download the Freedom Project Media app on your Apple TV, Roku, tablet, or phone, and make sure you allow for notifications to keep you informed.
All right, back now with Vicki McKenna for the second segment of CultureCast. And so in the first segment, we talked about skeletons, right? And the interesting about a skeleton, when you put it together or articulate it, you put it back together, is there's no penis, there's no vagina that you can see, there's no front hole or back hole. And so already what the progressive left is doing is suggesting that any kind of sexual or racial characteristics have really never existed. Meanwhile, we see what happens when we coddle the trans community. You have an African-American felon who's in prison. He now identifies as a woman, largely because I would imagine he doesn't want to be in the population with violent men. Anyway, this guy on the left, you can see him there, Demetrius Minor. He is a felon. He's in prison. He's also transgender, and now he's getting other prisoners pregnant. What a remarkable story.
So the guy is in a woman's prison, and it's like, my goodness, it's like a kid in the candy store. So he's knocking up women, and instead of anybody saying, geez, you know what, that's awful. And what's going to happen next? Is he going to decide he's going to rape someone? He's quite a large man. Instead of worrying for the safety or the stability or the mental health of the women in the women's prison, they shrug their shoulders and say, well, that's a woman. The guy, the chick with the penis, that's a woman. The chick with the penis getting other women pregnant, that's actually a woman. So presumably a lesbian got that woman, those two women pregnant in that prison. I mean, it's absurd beyond absurd. And yet we are not supposed to question it. We're accused of trying to dead name and erase and misgender and whatever else. So these women have to be put at risk. Even, you cannot feel sorry for them because they're in prison. I happen to feel sorry for them, whether they're in prison or not, but you put these women at risk simply because you're afraid to say something that might offend the Lavender Mafia. I don't understand why anyone has ever put up with this garbage.
I want you to humor me with this for just a moment. There are a lot of millennials and Gen Zers out there who are having no sex. They're too awkward. They're living in their mom's basement. They have no money. They're not having sex. Let's you and I create a dating site, because this is a brilliant idea. If you want all the sex you can have without any commitment, if you get your female partner pregnant, you will never have to pay alimony. You will never have to worry about supporting the kid. It's called felonious dating. You go out, commit a felony, we'll send you, and then the minute you're convicted, we'll help you transition into a woman. Right? Then you go to a women's prison, and you can have all the sex without consequences you want.
Right.
And we'll only take
worries.
Yeah, go knock off a bank, just pay us 10% commission. We'll put you in jail as a woman. And dude, you're going to have all and I'll bet you there are a lot of straight men who'll do this because wait, I can have all the sex I want and I don't have to talk to her, I don't have to date her, I don't have to buy her groceries, I don't have to pay any alimony. I'm not responsible for. Are you kidding me?
Well, plenty of, I think, guys, maybe even wouldn't want to do this. Demetrius Minor certainly doesn't look like any kind of shrinking violet beta male, fembot or anything like that. I like your idea, Duke, although it's a little diabolical, but I do like your idea. And that way those young men who, have become what they call them incels, the involuntary celibate because they're too weak and they have been raised by domineering mothers who bubble wrapped them and wouldn't let them skin their knee when they were little children, to the point where now they're just hiding in their basement playing video games, smoking weed and thinking about school shootings. They will be so much more compliant with the law if we can just get them to commit one quick felony. We'll make it a nonviolent felony so that we can get them in prison. And then maybe they can find the true love of their life pretending to be a woman in a ladies' prison. I like your idea. I think it actually could be good for the mental health of of distracted, detached young men.
And think about this. The feminists are going to love it too, because now, as we've been told for decades, men have no business being fathers. Women don't need men. When fathers are in the home, they're dangerous. Well, feminists should be right behind this, right? Because the people like Demetrius, an actual man, gets all these prisoners pregnant, but then he has no more further confluence with them, right? He doesn't have to be in the home. He doesn't have to live with them. I mean, so again,
it's women acting like men, right?
Perfectly feminist.
This is women acting. That's exactly what the feminists have always said, is that women can act like men, be detached from sex. Well, here's a guy, who's now declaring that he's a woman, and I'm supposed to respect him as an actual woman. This is the feminist, the myth the feminists have been peddling for a long time. Women who actually act and think like men. Duke, maybe this is somewhere deep in the psychology of the average left-wing feminist who's been bashing on men her entire life. Maybe something in her actually kind of likes men and needs men, but the only way she can find a way to make that make sense to her mental health is by turning men into women, and then they're acceptable and safe men, and it's okay to on the sly have an appreciation of the males of the species. You got to wonder if there isn't some deep psychology just looking for a way to bring men back into their lives because they've run them out for the last 40 years.
Doesn't it take us back to the stereotypes of slavery? The hulking black stud who is getting all these women pregnant is more of a woman than the women getting pregnant are. You cannot.
That's basically what the trans activist said.
That's right.
Who cares about the actual women who got knocked up? We only care about the fake woman who did, who made the move and did the deed. More of a woman than the actual women, which is just, you see this in cities as well when there's, riots and attacks on people, that the victims are less victims than the perpetrators of the violence, if the perpetrators of the violence are in an oppressed group or in a minority group. This is no different.
Today's show is sponsored by our friends at MyPillow. Save up to 66% on all items at MyPillow.com when you use the code Dr. Duke. That's DRDUKE. Support this show by supporting a great American company.
How can you trust someone, particularly a person in leadership, who cannot speak the truth about the most basic facts of life and humanity? Today's topic, reality. Now, first, the Church of England says there's no official definition of a woman. Second, a man, Leah Thomas, was just nominated by the University of Pennsylvania as the 2022 NCAA Woman of the Year. We're not joking. And third, the National Women's Law Center refuses to define woman. Sadly, I'm not making any of this up. I'm David Fiorazzo, and this is Christ and Culture. Recent history will go down as either ironic, moronic, or just simply baffling. We've seen a leftist Supreme Court justice unable to say what a woman is during her own Senate confirmation hearing, a radical Democrat socialist say, the hell with the Supreme Court after the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and she added, women are going to control their bodies no matter how they try to stop us. And in 1972, U.S. Olympic decathlon winner Bruce, now Caitlyn Jenner, says men should not be able to compete in women's sports. Confusing? It's difficult to predict how far this delusion will go, but there are no clear signs the celebration of moral relativism will end anytime soon. The Church of England, they're recently asked what its definition of a woman is, and responded by saying there is no official definition because recent developments required, quote, additional care, end quote, when attempting to define the word. Senior Bishop Robert Ines said the definition of a woman used to be self-evident, but no longer had a simple answer. Has he read the Bible, a science book, looked at a woman? Self-evident. Anyway, the world is in trouble when a news personality in Great Britain is more in touch with truth and reality than church and government leaders. Calvin Robinson argued that providing a clear answer should not be difficult. He said this, quote, the definition of woman is not a complex moral problem. It is a scientific and biblical truth. Next, in a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing last week, the president of the National Women's Law Center was unable to define the word woman. During a discussion about abortion and the overturning of Roe v. Wade, Fatima Gose Graves answered by deflecting and stated, I am a woman, that is how I identify. But the NWLC leader then went on to assert that people other than women can get pregnant, and that the representative's question is silly because it undermines this apparent reality. Quote, but I wonder, however, if in part the reason that you're asking the question is that you're trying to suggest that people who don't identify as women can't get pregnant, end quote. Now, one takeaway we can see from recent events is this apparent stumbling block. This is an apparent stumbling block for leftists. Simply answering basic questions about biology and so-called gender identity has them rattled. We'll see, or defensive, right? We'll see in November in the midterm elections how the voting public will respond to this insanity. By the way, did you see the alarming exchange last week between Senator Josh Hawley and radical Democrat at UC Berkeley law professor Kiera Bridges. Did you see this? Holly was accused of being transphobic and causing violence to transgender people for simply asking if women can get pregnant. The exchange is so astounding, you have to see it again. Watch this.
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy. I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic, and it opens up trans people to violence by not recognizing them.
Wow. Opens up trans people to violence. The college professor also declared that Senator Holly was denying that trans people exist and pretending not to know they exist. Finally, we had an idea this was coming, but swimmer Leah Thomas has now been nominated for the 2022 NCAA Woman of the Year Award. This just a few years after competing as a male, and after this past season when he competed with women and became the first male-born athlete to win a Division I women's title. The culture-conforming NCAA stated the honor, quote, recognizes female student athletes who have exhausted their eligibility and distinguished themselves in their community in athletics and in academics throughout their college careers, end quote. We can only predict where this all might be headed. God bless you, and keep speaking the truth about things that matter.
If you have a question for Dr. Duke and Katie, please send it our way by emailing askduke@fpeusa.org.
I guess you never realize that you're going to have to make sure that your bones are protected from modern-day anthropologists, or else in the grave, you're going to be outed, I'm telling you, and that's going to do it for this show. I'm Dr. Duke. Until next time, please stay educated, my friends.